This is Nathaniel Greene. He's a general from the American Revolution, famous as the American commander at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. And, with the exception of being the namesake for the town we're in, he has absolutely nothing to do with this video. On this edition of Retracing History, we're not exploring Nathaniel Greene's life. No, we're exploring Arthur St Clair. Who? Well, find out before this video is over, as we're going to explore his gravesite, talk a bit about his biography. We're going to go see select sites that are important to his career, his life devoted to creating the United States of America, and hopefully before the video is over, I've convinced you that he's an unsung hero of the United States founding. This is the grave of General Arthur St Clair. Probably don't recognize that name, and when we're done with this video, you're probably going to be asking, why have I not heard about this guy? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But just a very quick backstory about Arthur. Arthur came from Scotland. He was born in the 1730s, served in the Royal American Regiment, the 60th Foot for the British Empire during the French and Indian War, when Britain got possession of all of North America for a very brief moment in time. St. Clair resigned his post with the 60th Foot and ended up becoming what was known as civilian caretaker of Fort Ligonier, which is about a half-hour drive from where I'm standing, a British outpost that operated until 1766. Moved into the Ligonier Valley, established his estate. He ended up owning like 4,000 or 5,000 acres. And then he ended up becoming one of the first justice of the peace for Westmoreland County when it was founded in 1773. And that was at a point in time when Westmoreland County included basically the entire southwest corner of the modern day state of Pennsylvania. So yes, it did technically include Pittsburgh at one point. When the American Revolution came about, Westmoreland County, their safety committee held a meeting at the then county seat, Hannahstown. Today the county seat's where I'm standing, Greensburg, Pennsylvania. And they ended up voting on the Hannahstown Resolves, which boiled down to Westmoreland County declaring independence from Great Britain, at least from parliamentary law. They still respected the sovereign in 1775, King George III, but they were done with the taxes that Parliament had been imposing the past decade on the colonies like Pennsylvania. And you can imagine St. Clair signing the Hannahstown Resolves also meant that he was going to end up on the Patriot side during the Revolutionary War, and he ended up, I believe, becoming a Major General. I think that was his technical rank, Major General in the Continental Army. He was part of Washington's staff officers of staff. Now, St. Clair, he did some questionable tactical decisions, such as evacuating Fort Ticonderoga in 1777 and freeing up the garrison of Fort Ticonderoga gave reinforcements to other American forces who would defeat the British at the Battle of Saratoga just a few months later. After the Revolutionary War, he kept serving the United States as it started to develop the ideas of its government. He was elected to the Confederation Congress in 1785, and then in 1787 he ended up becoming president of the United States. Well, technically he was voted as president of the Congress, and the president under the Articles of Confederation was a one-year term and just kind of oversaw all the infighting that was happening on the House floor. But technically we could say Arthur was a president in the United States of America. Gotta stretch it there to make it sound cool for the video. So he served as president of the Confederation Congress, and during his term is when the U.S. Constitution was introduced and eventually would be ratified the following year. So the U.S. Constitution came into being the law of this country during his one-year term as president of the Congress. And he was also very supportive of that Constitution. He would list himself as a Federalist when party politics starts developing in the 1790s. Now, after being president, he ended up becoming governor of the Northwest Territory, and St. Clair will end up moving out to Marietta, Ohio to oversee the United States taking possession of that land. Wasn't an easy task, however. A lot of people out west, they didn't know what to make of this Scotsman. He was not really from this region, though he was living in the frontier here in western Pennsylvania. Northwest Territory, present-day Ohio, whole other ball game. And he also had to deal with the fact that, of course, it wasn't land for the United States just willingly to take. This was land, this was home to a variety of different tribes who had lived here for centuries. I should say lived there, Northwest Territory. I'm in Pennsylvania. Eventually, after a few military setbacks, as the United States Army started moving into the Northwest Territory and were defeated piecemeal by native tribes, St. Clair mounted a horse once more to lead troops in the field, and it did not go well for him. I got a 3-part series documenting what became known as St. Clair's defeat. On November 4th, 1791, Arthur St. Clair's American army was found by a native alliance, was known as the Northwest Confederacy. Some said it was led by Little Turtle, others said it was led by Blue Jacket. And in any case, these 1,000 native warriors destroyed St. Clair's command. Casualty rate fluctuates, depending on who you ask, between 70% to 90%. St. Clair's defeat is generally regarded as the greatest military disaster in United States history. Well, after that happened, you can imagine Arthur, he didn't have a good time. No, George Washington basically gave him an ultimatum. There's going to be a congressional investigation. My administration is kind of doomed. So you got 2 things to do. 1, you can go through the investigation and be found guilty, or 2, resign and save yourself from a terrible court-martial. Now, I need to retcon a little bit. I said the congressional investigation actually found him not guilty, but he was worried of actually being court-martialed and drummed out of the army in disgrace. So instead of taking that route, he quietly resigned his command in the United States Army, kept maintaining his position as governor of the Northwest Territory. You can imagine his policies were not popular at this point. And eventually, when Thomas Jefferson in 1801 becomes president of the United States, Jefferson was an anti-federalist. St. Clair is a federalist. St. Clair does not have a good military track record. I think you can see what Jefferson's about to do to this guy. St. Clair lost his position as the governor of Northwest Territory, came back to this region. He tried to make a living off of a variety of small businesses in the Ligonier Valley. None of them were profitable. He was bankrupt by this point. He spent so much of his life in the military, so much of his life being away from home, that his mounting debts caught up to him. He had to sell everything off at his home, and he ended up dying penniless in 1818. There was a little bit of a fight over where he was going to be buried. People in the Ligonier Valley wanted him to be buried where his home was, while other people argued in the county, hey, he's one of our leading founders for Westmoreland County. He should be buried in the new county seat of Greensburg. And you can see who ended up winning this. So this is where Arthur St. Clair has laid ever since, alongside his wife, Phoebe St. Clair, Phoebe Bayard St. Clair. Now, this monument was not installed at the time of his death. Actually, it actually took almost a half century to get this put in. This was not put in until the late 19th century. I forget if it was through Congress, or if it was through the Pennsylvania government, or if it was DAR funds. It might have been a combination of all of them. But the U.S. Congress enacted a recognition of his services, announcing that he had not gotten the recognition he deserved during his life, and that some sort of fitting monument should be installed at his grave, and this is the result of it. You'll see here, it says right here, this stone is erected over the bones of their departed brother, my members of the Masonic Society resident in this vicinity. So it looks like the Freemasons had some involvement with this. Beneath this monument also lies Phoebe Bayard, wife of General St. Clair, who died just a few weeks after her husband had died. This monument, erected in 1913 by members of the Masonic fraternity resident in the vicinity, replaces and is a duplicate of a sandstone monument which was erected in 1832. The inscription on this panel alone, accepted. And here it is, his actual side of the monument. The earthly remains of Major General Arthur St. Clair are deposited beneath this humble monument, which is erected to supply the place of a nobler one due from his country. Ooh, look at that. There's some spice in that. Due from this country. He died August 31st, 1818. 84 years of age. Man, he lived really long. That's long, especially considering it's the early 19th century. And I got a grave over there from a guy from the 19th century who died in his late 30s. And I guess St. Clair liked grape juice? St. Clair's not the only grave still staying in St. Clair Park. There's just a small cluster right here in the corner of the park. Originally, this was the burial grounds for the borough of Greensburg. I don't know if it was exclusively Presbyterian. I know the Presbyterian Church was nearby, or it was a variety of denominations that were buried here. But in any case, this was one of the primary burial grounds in town up until the 1880s. Around the late 19th century, a variety of communities in the United States started relocating their burial grounds outside of borough districts. The reason being fear that the burials were not done properly in the past and they may pollute the water supply for the communities. So most of the graves were moved, but you'll notice there's a few still remaining. Oh dear, this looks like Civil War, Spanish-American War. The headstone's knocked over. Samuel Young, Private Company B, 101st Pennsylvania Infantry. That is Civil War. That would be nice if somebody would come and fix that. Now, most of the graves were relocated to other burial grounds on the outskirts of Greensburg. Why there's a few still here? Well, for years people said it was because these were wealthy to-do individuals, or noteworthy individuals, and they did not want they paid to remain here. But let's consider that Arthur St. Clair, when he died, he was penniless. That monument was only put there half a century later by the government. So it's more likely that these individuals either did not have family who had the funds to move their graves, outright did not have family who were around who could move the graves, or they just were not marked well and people forgot about them. After most of the graves were relocated in the cemetery, this plot of land became St. Clair Park, named after General St. Clair, and is used to this day by the community of Greensburg to host variety events here at the Robert Shaw Amphitheater. And there is a nice walking trail, particularly if you have animals, as there's a lot of wayside to dispose of your pets, their business. Now, you're probably thinking this is a little weird to start a biography off at an individual's gravesite. There is a method to my madness. As I mentioned, St. Clair died penniless in 1818. There's not much left of him, I guess you'll say physically, from what he left on this earth. At least nothing like artifacts and such like that. However, he did leave a monumental impact, and there's a lot of little locations not well known, well marked, where he either lived or did his business or key in his life. We're just going to visit a few of them. They're all here in western Pennsylvania, so we're going to go into certain aspects, hyper-focus on certain aspects about Arthur St. Clair's life. Now, I don't have time to travel everywhere that I want to today, but through the power of editing, I can teleport to all the locations we're going to see before the end of this video. And the powers of editing also give me wardrobe changes for each teleportation. So I am currently standing inside what would have been the parlor room of St. Clair's home, which, as we mentioned, was known as the Hermitage, located a mile north of the community of Ligonier, Pennsylvania. It's about 50 miles to the east of the city of Pittsburgh. Now, I mentioned earlier that Arthur was an officer in the 60th Foot, also known as the Royal American Regiment, and when he resigned his commission in 1762, he received a tract of land in western Pennsylvania. Just a small little tract of about 4,000 acres of undeveloped wilderness. Now, Arthur is going to move to the Ligonier Valley in the early 1760s with his wife, Phoebe Bayard. Now, Bayard, a little more about her. She was the daughter of a wealthy individual in Boston, and Bayard primarily knew life as an aristocratic family. Moving to the wilderness was a whiplash experience for her. No less that she also would end up raising 7 children here in the Ligonier Valley and on the western frontier. Now, there is dispute as to what the original configuration of this house was like. Some say that it was a one-story L-shaped log cabin, while other sources say it was a two-story estate. And the photographic evidence we have show it being two stories, but keep in mind, those are depictions of it in the 20th century. A lot of modifications had happened to this residence. Now, in addition to the house itself, Arthur also owned a grist mill. He had his hand in a variety of different blast furnace businesses here in the Ligonier Valley, smelting iron ore. However, at the end of his life, being penniless, he had to sell off this estate. He had valued it at $50,000 US. He got $4,000 as a result, and just about all of his worldly possessions were auctioned. So the possessions that you're seeing around me in the parlor room, they're actually antiques from the late 18th, early 19th century, not of Arthur's possession. But there is an exception for that. If you notice on the wall behind me, there are two silhouettes. Those are silhouettes that were owned by the St. Clair family of Arthur and Phoebe. Where we're currently standing, you probably notice we're not actually in a house. You'll notice there's a museum around us. And that's because, unfortunately, in the 1960s, the Hermitage was condemned. Fortunately, the Fort Ligonier Association purchased the parlor room, cut it off of the main house, and relocated it to the Fort Ligonier Museum in downtown Ligonier. So visitors can come in today and actually get to explore the only surviving piece of Major General St. Clair's residence. Now, I also want to mention, during his time as being a general for the Continental Army and then being governor of the Northwest, he had a bit of absence from his home, which probably led to the reason he ultimately had to sell it all off, was because this house fell into neglect. The estate fell into neglect as he was busy tending to his governorship and commanding soldiers on the battlefield. So when he came back at the end of his governorship in the early 1800s, this house probably wasn't in a good state of repair. But in any case, the museum here, the Fort Ligonier Museum, now preserves and gives an idea of what St. Clair's life may have looked like on the frontier. Noble frontier living, let's just say. So this is a photograph in the early 20th century of the Hermitage. And you can notice in the image, it's now two stories. It has 3 different fireplaces, you can see as well. Quite big, though, again, as I mentioned, there is dispute on to what the building looked like during St. Clair's stay. There is confidence that this portion was one of the first parts added. And you can see here, actually, at least this would have been an interior wall. You can actually see the original log structure. This would have likely been covered in later in the 19th century, the residents probably covered it in plaster, but that's all been taken off, so you can see the original 18th century interior wall. Now, another thing they do cool is they do a little explanation about how they relocated the parlor here. And it was done by let's read here, me reading. It was by the Lida Construction Company. And you can see when they brought the parlor room, it was covered like in a mixture of stencil brick and wooden siding. Looks like it was painted at the time. And this has changed greatly since then. Just give you a bit of idea where we're at. This is Route 711, and then this back here, it's US 30, part of the Lincoln Highway that goes across the United States. And then this shows you when they set down the parlor room. Initially it was outside the museum, and it was an attachment to the building, but later on they enclosed this wing, so the parlor room can now be perfectly preserved. So we've teleported to Bedford, Pennsylvania, because the structure behind me was where Arthur St. Clair had his prefectionary office when he was the prefectionary for Bedford County in 1771. Now, this is known today as the David Espy House. David Espy wouldn't own this property until after the American Revolution. So people probably more simply refer to it as St. Clair's office when it was first established in 1771. According to the local lore, he had his office actually in the basement portion of the structure. And the structure that is standing from St. Clair's time here is the fieldstone structure that's right on Pitt Street. There have since been additions added on in the back over the years. Now, Arthur St. Clair ain't too well remembered for his time in Bedford because it was relatively brief. He moved out here in 1771 to take charge of the Profanary in Bedford when it was first established, but his lands were much farther west than this county seat, and St. Clair probably knew when he set up shop here it wasn't going to be a full-time job because a new county was going to be created where his estate was located. That was Westmoreland County, founded in 1773. So in just 2 years, he moved out of Bedford, moved farther west, closer to his home, and he would continue the same practices that he had here in Bedford. I've been calling him Profanary. He actually had a variety of different titles. Justice of the Peace. He was an early clerk for Bedford County. He did the same stuff essentially for Westmoreland County. Now, the reason the structure is preserved has nothing to do with Arthur. In fact, it has everything to do with George Washington, because this is where George Washington had his headquarters during the Whiskey Rebellion, at least for one night in October of 1794. And at that point, Colonel SB was owning this property, hence the namesake of the structure today. So this is one of the only prominent landmarks from Arthur St. Clair's life that's still surviving, but it's preserved not because of Arthur actually having an office here. That's just an added bonus. Well, that's going to conclude at least this installment on Arthur St. Clair's life. I've covered him before on the channel, and I'm probably going to bring him up again, as where I'm from here in southwestern Pennsylvania, he's one of the big figures in our history. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, well, you can hit the thumbs up button down below because it lets the algorithm know you want to see more videos like this. If you want to be the first notified when a new episode from Retracing History or one of my other history videos comes out, be sure to subscribe here to Readout Productions. And be sure, if you really want to, you can join the Garrison. You can join the Garrison through my Ko-fi page. Links in the description below. For just $2 a month, you too can become part of the Garrison here at Readout Productions, helping to support me in making these historic videos. You will get your name recognized somewhere here as the credits roll. You'll also get a monthly digital postcard from trips like this, and you're also going to get access to select scripts from my videos going forward. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next video.